Hello and a warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Boyhumer. This is mini episode 18. Many thanks for joining us. As always, shout out to the new listeners. There's been a bunch of you lately as we make our march towards world domination. Thanks for joining us. I also encourage you to check out our webpage. Surprisingly, it's called theinternetofThingsMadeSimple.com, which has some great material that we've done over the past year or so. A couple dozen blogs, some ebooks that are free to download on Apple Books or iBooks or whatever the heck it's called. And of course, links to our podcast and to my book, which, by the way, is also called The Internet of Things Made Simple, and it's available in digital and paperback. And finally, as I always do, I humbly ask that you subscribe to this podcast. We do episodes weekly. I usually put them up on Wednesday afternoons. And would it not be great to have it arrive in time for your Thursday morning coffee? We make it easy. We're on 24 services, including Apple, Google, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, and more. In this episode, we're going to focus on an upcoming technology that has been in the news slightly less than the Mueller report. Like that report, most of the news surrounding 5G is about hype, as networks are only for the most part in trial or limited deployments. That has not stopped manufacturers, however, from putting out 5G phones, which for the most part are either quite cumbersome or require expensive upgrades to work. I've mentioned before, you definitely should not buy a 5G product this year. Your business needs to start planning to make its move to 5G next year and to start doing it now. In the next few minutes, we're going to cover the good and bad about the move towards 5G and offer some pointers to how to get you the best return on your investment. To start, you've now decided to gain the freedom and extra speed offered by 5G. The first decision you have to make is how many connections your company might need. Do you simply replace your existing DSL and/or cable connection outright with 5G, which is definitely a viable option? Or do you give a 5G-enabled device to each one of your teams, or do you do both? The answer to this depends mostly on what you do and how mobile your team is. Let's use the example of a doctor's office or maybe a small legal office. The vast majority of your work is done in your location. People don't take stuff home, and perhaps they don't do house calls. As well, it's probably unlikely that your team would be major data hogs, as a big portion of what you do could be text-based files. One single 5G connection would give you more than enough bandwidth today and for many years to come. However, let's change that example a little bit to an architectural firm. While a lot of work still is done in the office, they'll often need connectivity at a client's office or at a work site. You also likely have massive files to send and receive, so it makes sense to use a dual approach here. Using a single 5G connection would be ideal for most of your administration, financial, and other employees that don't leave your office regularly. And a 5G powered setup would work very well for most of your architects and engineers and mobile employees. Finally, if your team does work remotely at different times and different locations, which is becoming much more common all the time, it would likely make sense to have each employee use a 5G powered setup of their own and not to bother with a central internet connection for everyone. So now that we've spoken about the setup, let's move on to talking about some of the benefits for your company. First, your network should become more safe. I say should because there are some variables here that if you don't account for it could make you more vulnerable. While in your office, you have the ability to lock down whatever you want. But once your employees use other networks to gain access to your information on your server, you can become vulnerable. Do you really know how safe that Wi-Fi network is at the local coffee shop that your employee might use? Yeah, you can use VPNs and other security technology, but why bother to take the risk in the first place? Along the same lines, if your employees log into a Wi-Fi network at home, do you know if they've secured it properly for unwanted visitors? Again, why take the chance? If you allow your devices only to access the internet using 5G or 4G if 5G is not available, you now control everything. You control what web pages they go to, you can apply network attack prevention methods, and you can also ensure that no one's snooping in on your data. On to the second advantage. You now have a built-in disaster and network continuity solution to use. For years, companies have been using cellular networks and satellite in some locations to provide a reliable and low-cost backup in the event that their main wired infrastructure is not available. This could be due to a construction accident, a network outage, you have to evacuate, or any other reason. Cellular proved to be a great backup, as networks are not as prone to lines being cut. And most of the cell sites are battery backed up for at least 8 hours and allowed you to get it set up quickly somewhere else. Now companies are realizing that cellular's reliability and performance levels can make it viable to use it as the primary access point to the internet. So you still have that same disaster protection you always did, because you can use what's called load balancing or dual SIM and have two different networks provide your connectivity. In case you're wondering what exactly is load balance and dual SIM, I've explained those two things in much more detail in webinars that you can listen to. Just check out Novatech Knows, KNOWS, on YouTube. But here's the quick recap. Load balancing, which is when you use two different cellular connections at the same time, hopefully from different providers that don't share the same network, helps to not only improve speed, but to have a fallback in the event that one of them isn't available. Dual SIM is kind of the same thing, but it refers to when one connection is used as a primary and the other one's used as a fallback. Why you use one versus the other, that's really up to you on rate plans. Check with your network providers to see which one of those would work best for you. In the event of evacuation, which if you consider the amount of storms, floods, fires, and other issues going on in the news, might happen more often than you think, you can easily move your business to a safe spot and just pick up where you left off. The final advantage is in cost, but this does have a caveat to it, so pay attention here. One of the long-standing reasons why companies did not cut the wired connection into their office was potentially ongoing cost, namely the model of paying for data per gigabyte. They were able to get a fixed cost from their landline provider, and while it might have been high, they at least knew they could rely on it each month. The next wave of 5G is expected to offer a fixed cost for some companies, meaning the fear of a bill spike is gone. So does this mean that every company will save money? No, it doesn't necessarily mean it. I guess it depends on what you do. If you're a bakery and you only ever send text-based orders to your suppliers, things like point-of-sale transactions, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to see a dramatic drop in your monthly bill by switching over to 5G. If you're a video game design shop, though, sending terabytes of data each month, you're definitely going to want to do some research before you make the leap. 5G is not perfect for everyone. There are some bad sides to it. Let's talk about a couple of examples here. Here's what you need to consider as a downside to a possible switch. The first is a definite negative, but one that will get better as time progresses, and that's the current network coverage. 5G coverage will be negligible in 2019 and even into 2020 in some areas. So you're going to find yourself spending an awful lot of time in 4G or even slower coverage, depending on where you work. If your entire office is only ever in 4G, do you have enough bandwidth to run your office? You'll have to find out. The other part about 4G is that it probably does have enough bandwidth and network capacity for some offices. It's not 5G though. If your office is located in a heavily used area of the cellular network, so think downtown Manhattan or anywhere else in a big city for that matter, you might find that speeds can degrade faster on 4G during certain times of the day or week, worse than they would on 5G, which has the ability to support more traffic. The second concern is a potential cause of bad cell performance, and that's the lack of coverage in your facilities for cellular networks. If you're unfamiliar with how cellular speeds can change based on coverage, I recommend you kind of stop here and listen to mini episode 16 that I did a few weeks ago. It covers how businesses can benefit from enhancing cell coverage, and we went into more detail on how bad coverage affects your speed. There's a few reasons why a location could have inferior cell coverage. The first is that your location isn't a great spot to begin with, it's a bit remote, or isn't well covered by the cell carriers even outside. Each of them strive for perfect coverage, but there is network gaps everywhere. There are solutions to help. We spoke about these in that same mini episode, easy to use in building solutions, but even with those, coverage might be an issue for some locations. So imagine you have great cell coverage outside. You still might not have good coverage inside, and that's the second reason. Perhaps your office is what I refer to as a bunker-type facility, and enhancing coverage is not a possibility. Take the example of somebody renting out space in an old factory. These factories may have metal roofs, cement walls, and other barriers that block cell signal. You may also not have access to run external antennas to drill through these things to help your signal. This could be a barrier to using any cell technology as your primary method of accessing the internet. Finally, imagine the two scenarios don't apply. You have strong cell coverage in your area, outside and inside, and you can access the internet on the cell network everywhere you go. I always think that you should think of a cell network as a living organism as it adapts to the environment that it's in. In the event of a major issue, so think train derailment or other disaster, the network will often shrink in size to accommodate the extra traffic. The same holds true if someone were to take out a cell tower. While the carriers have obviously planned for disasters and implemented duplication in their designs, crap happens. The good thing is that using enhanced antennas and perhaps an in-building enhancement solution can protect you greatly from this affecting your business. But remember, if you're on the fringe of coverage during a good time, you may want to think about how your business will handle bad cell coverage during a bad time. Okay, so I just threw a bunch of stuff at you, so here's some final thoughts to help you consider the good, bad, and the ugly. 1. Once there's 5G coverage in your area, all but a few small businesses should immediately make the switch. If your office has less than 10 people, it's extremely unlikely you're ever going to exceed the speed of a 5G connection, and this network offers so much more overall capacity that it's quite unlikely you'll see network capacity hit the point that slows your connection down, which can happen on current cellular technology. Point number 2, if you have remote employees who need access to corporate-based information from anywhere, while on the road, while at customer locations, you should plan on moving them over to 5G-based access solutions sometime in 2020, maybe 2021 if they work in fairly remote areas all the time. If they can sufficiently do the work all the time on 4G, if 5G is not available, that might help you speed up the timelines just a little bit. Point number 3, if the speed offered by 5G is not required and your team does not use a ton of data for their roles, consider a 4G-based solution for them, as it's probably going to be much more cost-effective. 4, all of your existing routing gear that you have in the office will work fine when you change from a wired connection to a 5G-based one. However, you may also want to consider some of the cellular-based routers that offer a lot of remote-based features that are meant for cellular-based and can also even handle some of the most demanding security requirements. And 5, if you're still in doubt, consider taking a baby step forward. Some landline providers may offer a scaled-down version of their wire connection, perhaps offering less speed or even with a data cap for business. You can always do a trial where you use the 5G-enabled connection as your primary and the wired as your backup if you're still concerned about cutting the wire. But do keep in mind, considering the nature of what information is currently sent over cellular connections today, think traffic light controllers, secure first responder data, and financial transactions, I don't think it'll take long for you to see that the wire connection is going to gracefully make its exit with the launch of 5G. As always, love to hear from you. The best place to start is our Facebook page, also called The Internet of Things Made Simple, and we also have some links to material and other things there as well. If I'm personally connected to you on LinkedIn, drop me a note. We can chat that way. Or if we're personally connected, send me an email or a text. Hope to hear from you. Take care. I'm Larry Boy Humor. Talk soon.